should not go out. Stay at home. Start working from home. Stop non-essential contact. Protect our NHS. Stay at home. And save lives.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to another version of the Lockdown Diaries. Hello to all the viewers wherever you are. We're live on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, Twitch, and here on Crowdcast. If you want to say hi or ask a question, ask away whichever social media system you're in, and we'll get back to you. We can pop the questions up as we go through. If you're on Crowdcast, you have some extra special features. You can pop a question into the box at the bottom as we go, and we'll answer them for you. And you can even vote on the ones you like the most. At the end of the show, I'm going to pop up a special link for a competition to win a really lovely Olympus professional audio recorder, so stay tuned for that. This week, we're going to be taking a look at how to get decent video out of your stills camera. And many of us now have mirrorless cameras, but what we'll be chatting about will actually also apply to other cameras like DSLRs as well. But with me in the lockdown studio today is Jimmy Cheng. And Jimmy is a self-taught, award-winning photographer and filmmaker who has moved into professional video from shooting stills. He started shooting stills at the very ripe age of 13, very tender, and moved from using a point and shoot, and now he's shooting documentary, street and travel work. And I'm really pleased he's joining us this afternoon. So let's cross over now to wherever he is, and hopefully Jimmy's there. Jimmy, are you there?
I'm here, and how are you guys? How are you, Rick?
I'm good, thank you. Hopefully this all works. It's a great picture. I'm pleased to see. We've had some interesting visuals over the last few weeks, but there we go. Thanks for joining us. It's nice to have a clear image, and welcome.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So let's kick off. We'll crash through, and because I know people are going to have questions, and we're going to talk a lot about video and stuff. But I think that what's nice is if we should we sort of take a little look back and if you want a quick intro to who you are, so people know who they're watching, and a little intro. And we've had a little chat over the last week or so, but it's been quite fun to get to know someone new. So do you want to sort of give a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, of course. And for people who don't know me, but you kind of did a little bit intro for me already. I am actually a professional photographer and filmmaker. So I earn majority of my income doing those two things. And but I didn't start out as a photographer, videographer, or anything relating to kind of the visual spectrum of the things. You know, I'm actually an engineer, so I study engineering in university. I graduated and I worked as an engineer for about 7-8 years. And but you know, like Rick already mentioned, I got my very first camera at the age of 13. There was a very simple point and shoot film camera that I guess most people at my age would have one back in them days. And so I've just got on with that camera for about 6-7 years, documenting my journey when I was studying abroad from Hong Kong. That's my hometown, and in Canada for a couple of years. And I eventually moved to UK to study university. And at that point, I think I wouldn't say that I was serious about photography, but it's more like I was playing around with it, you know, like I got a camera, I got some films, and what should I do? You know, just to kind of take some pictures and send it home so my mum can see what I'm doing, kind of thing. And but yeah, it's pretty cool. Then I did a road trip. I think that's at that point is what kickstarted my little fire inside me. It's like an ignition key, and someone just switched it on. And I saw my classmate at the time having like these SLRs, you know, film stuff. So we went on for a week road trip, and I see after a week of driving around UK, and at the end of the trip, we came back, developed the photos, and you know, I was just astonished by the quality. But you know, as you know, that you know, it's not just about a camera; it's more about your eyes and everything like that in terms of artistic stuff. And you know, but I was inspired, you know, basically from what they can achieve from like a proper camera. So that kind of kicked me into that
Can I just, Jimmy, what film stock did you shoot on? What was your film
stock? Oh gosh,
Portrait?
I would have to say I was a Fuji guy.
Gold. You were Fuji. Okay. 'Cause
Yeah,
I
I was
was
a
at
Fuji guy.
gold.
So I
used to
use
shoot.
a lot of the well, when you first started, you don't have that much money. You go for the
No.
consumer level stuff, which is like
Yeah.
superior, like 100, 200, 400 kind of thing.
Gold 400. I think I was on for a while until I
Yeah.
until I started to
But
discover
then
portraits.
but the thing is, once you learn a little bit more about film stock, you start to go for slightly more quality. It's just like like upgrading your camera. But in the old days, you don't really need to upgrade your camera for better resolution. You get for better film.
If you could buy it in boots, it wasn't professional film stock. That was my marker. Anyway, so do you want to sort of, and then you did your whole kind of, you got the bug, and then at what point did the China trip come in? Because we've got some images that you've sent me to have a look through. So at what point in your sort of photographic journey did that happen?
Basically, after I got inspired, I saved up some money, got my very first SLR, and that's when I started traveling and documenting places that I've been and people that I see. And I was really terrible at first. You're still more trying to get my hands around the camera and learning how to, shooting film is very different to learning digital. Now you can see what you get instantly from the back of your screen. But back in them days, if you go onto a trip, you really don't see your photos until you actually finish your trip. Come back, you still have to wait for about a week before you can see the photos. So until then, I can start thinking about, oh, I made that mistake. I should have done this and should have done that. So the process would be very, very long by comparison. But then, the more, it's all about practice at the end of the day. So the more travel I did, the more photograph I took, I became better and better over time. Obviously, also study other people's work as well. When I got more and more into photography, I started to buy photo books from other grandmasters, who are doing certain genre of photography, and I'm starting to learn from them and trying to deconstruct the photos and trying to see how I can achieve that sort of thing and apply to my own travel. And then at the end of the day, so not at the end of the day, but back in, I think, 2008 and 9, that's when I go to China, and then I did a series of photos about China, and that got a lot of buzz about it,
Let's have a look at those. So do you want to just kind of, you can chat us through the photos as we go. If you like.
I'm looking at the screen right now. Yeah, awesome. It's coming up. So so this particular trip I went to China, I believe it was 11 or 14 days. I can't exactly remember how many days I spent in China, but not to one place. Is actually, I was traveling around China. So I went to, I believe it was 8 different cities in China. So it's quite cramming, very packed. So we did a lot of movings, a lot of traveling in between cities, and but it was fun. But I documented a lot. This is only a sort of small selection of all the photos that I did. I don't know if you remember the days when we used to blog a lot online. That's before we had broadband, and the only kind of thing that's popular in the days is showing photograph and you reading text what people write about the experience. So nowadays, you got YouTube, you got things, you got vlogs, people can talk about things live almost. But in the old days, you write about your experience and you show the photo accompanying the paragraph that you write. So that was what I was doing. I was actually writing, I think it was 5 series of blogs about China, and these photos here actually got recognized and by Business Insider in the US, and subsequently they asked me to be interviewed and show or being featured and publish the photos in their websites and magazines.
So, I mean, that's a great point actually, because those blogs back in the day is ancient, but it was basically just almost like a diary that was just being recreated on the screen. It wasn't very interactive. It was like you write a bit, you stick some pictures, almost like you bought some postcards and stuck them in a book. So you did the whole China thing, you did the travel thing, and then you sort of went, hang on, I want to start taking wedding photos now. And we are going to get onto shooting movies in a minute. It's just kind of, I think the whole story, the reason we're talking about the stuff now is because it's kind of like many photographers, including myself, you kind of go through this sort of journey of starting in stills and you start thinking about video. So from the China travel situation, the blogging, the weddings, how did that come about? Was that just kind of, I need to do something that's a bit more commercial and going to get me more money than just swanning around the world with a camera? Was it more of a commercial decision?
Of course. Well, I was actually quite happy. I mentioned that I was an engineer, so I had a decent income. I have a 9 to 5. Couldn't really ask for more, to be quite honest, as a young gentleman, graduated not long ago. But after the China trip and after you kind of get some appreciation and recognition from other people, in the industry, and appreciating your work, and that's really kind of got me into thinking, maybe I could do something with the camera. Maybe I was good enough to do something. But even then, I wasn't really sure and jumping straight into like giving up my 9 to 5. So I was doing it as a part-time thing. And at that time, it's come to the age when a lot of my friends are starting to get married and things like that. And so I was asked by a few of my friends.
I'll jump on this.
Yeah.
You got a camera. You got a camera, Jimmy. Shoot my wedding. Was it one of those conversations?
It was one of those, exactly. Like you just over a couple of pints in the pub. Is like, hey, you do decent photos. You want to be my wedding photographer?
Yeah. Then the problem, you get into the situation where you think, am I being invited because I'm their friend or because they want me to take photos? So consequently, I never get invited to anywhere anymore because of that. Because I don't take my camera with me because I know what they're after. I don't have any friends.
No.
So should we have a look at some of your wedding stuff while we chat about that and what happened through that? Let's so here's your wedding stuff. So if you want, you carry on. I'll leave this with you.
Yeah, so and then kind of that's how I started getting into some paid jobs, and finally, I can actually earn money from the camera, and then I just kind of a snowball starting to build up, and because initially it was just friends, but then the friends starting to see their photos and they like the photo and they start asking me. But by then, you're losing the original circle of friends. You're going outside the circle, and that's kind of expanded my business. And eventually, like people who were contacting me just simply do not know where they were and where the connection was. So you're just simply asking for my service.
Sure. And you stuck with weddings. You still do weddings now, right? Or have you kind of?
I still do weddings, and but now I'm being a little bit more selective now, and because my job has expanded so much. Like you mentioned, this particular series that we talk about today is about video, so I'm venturing into things that is outside of just wedding photography now. Like I'm including a lot of different services, everything to do with mirrorless cameras, actually, not specifically SLR or DSLR these days.
And what is it about mirrorless that you enjoy specifically?
I think is the boundary, because you can see that from the 10 years ago when kind of like I would say the infancy of mirrorless cameras until like now, it's only a mere like 10 years to a decade. I can see the technological improvement in terms of video capabilities, the autofocus capabilities, and all kinds of things that's happening right now. That didn't happen in the DSLRs, and I think that kind of drove me into mirrorless for the fact that, there are lots of benefits out there. Well, first of all, would be the EVF. I know there is still a debate about which way you want to go, OVF or EVF, but as you becoming more and more a commercial photographer, the EVF does give you a lot of benefits in terms of what you see, what you get. In terms of photography, it's good. For video, obviously, it's good. You can see all the exposure, and you don't really have to rely on for instance, these metering bars on the DSLR. If you still remember those little kind of what do you call those? The little exposure bars at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah. So do you find now that because we're going to have a quick little bit through a quick look. What's that? It's not even a word. A look through some of the sort of you're still doing the travel stuff, you're doing street photography, right? So is this because you find it easier to shoot that kind of work on a sort of more compact system, but gives you the sort of quality of a larger, heavier, annoying camera to drag around? So some of these stuff, do you think you could get some of the shots you get if you weren't using a mirrorless, or do you think it helps you? When you're running around busy streets or holding bags around, does it help your photography, the system, or not, or does it make any difference?
Yeah, well, I think both, and size definitely matters, especially that I'm shooting Micro Four Third, which is a smaller system compared to the full frame or APS-C systems. In terms of shooting on the street, being discreet, is kind of one of the things you have to be if you want to don't want to get in trouble.
If you want to keep your kneecaps.
Or maybe it's an iPhone, and but it's actually gave me a lot of benefits, and because I do a lot of street portrait as well, and whenever I go out on the street and facing a stranger, I want to take photograph like this one that you're showing at the moment, a lady at the screen, and I was pointing cameras directly at them.
She wasn't going to chase after you.
You know what you did? This particular photo actually was taken in Cuba.
Right, yeah, I was going to say maybe her brother or son might have come after you with a large kosh or something, but probably not her.
But yeah, it helps because they weren't feel intimidated. Because I remember the days when I used a bigger DSLR, the full frame stuff, and then the lens would at least be double the size. So not so much about the weight, but even the size is quite intimidating, especially pointing to a stranger. He or she may or may not be familiar with being photographed, and you don't get that awkward moment anymore. And so I'm able to get close to my subject if I really want to, and that helps not only just on street but also wedding as well, which is the same thing. And the reason I kind of take on street photography from doing wedding was, it's kind of like a good training, also like a Zen place for me to meditate in a way. Starting to learn about observations and patience.
So you meditate on the street while you're taking photos.
I meditate on the street. Yes.
Excellent. So how have you evolved now? Where are we at? We're moving. You've had your travel experience, which you obviously still have a passion for, and you have your kind of wedding portfolio, I guess, which you're doing. You're doing less weddings now, or you're doing more sort of on the video side? Is that how you've kind of swinging it around? You're still doing them, just slightly different?
I think I'm more 50-50 at the moment. So like I do 50 photography and 50 video. But in terms of weddings, I'm doing less wedding because I'm taking more on more other work, which whether it's going to be events, videoing, or actually small a commercial kind of advertising jobs. For videos. So I'm actually doing a bit of everything now, and everything to do with the camera. So it's actually pretty cool that I can use just one system to do everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did the proposals thing, which we can look at, we're going to have a look to, how did that, how's that happened? Because you would expect you to started doing those and gone to weddings after that. You kind of did it backwards.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, and I have to kind of blame the British mentality. They never as they're always a little bit more reserved, beg my pardon. And I think these kind of like public proposal capturing is more of an American thing. But I believe the British is catching up now, and they're starting to like this sort of like once in a lifetime moment capturing opportunity, whether it's going to be photography or video.
Hang around with a long trench coat while this couple are about to have their, they're about to have their lives change, and are you just kind of hovering in the background with your camera, looking not very suspicious, and then suddenly when the guy pops the question, up pops Jimmy with his camera. Is that,
you know what? Yeah, one thing does help me, and is that I'm Chinese, so like I actually look like a tourist wherever I go.
Do you carry a selfie stick as well, just for the full effect?
There you go. Fun. I have my backpack on. I have my cap on. People just think I'm one of the tourists around.
So you're just completely playing to stereotypes, which is marvelous. That's brilliant.
It is, but it works fine. It works. Yeah. It works for my advantage. Yeah.
So no one's basically noticing the small Chinese man with the camera while the guy's on one knee with a wedding ring, and then suddenly up you pop and excuse me, love, can I take your photo?
Absolutely.
No wonder that's hilarious. So we and then how did you go from the proposal side, and how did how did the video thing start to creep in? Was it just the change of tech, or you were like, hang on, I need to figure out how to make some more money here?
Yeah, funny you ask, because it's actually requested by one of my clients, and who asked me to document the proposal. So initially he asked me for just purely photography service, but then he did ask me a question: do you do video? I said, well, I can either do photos or videos, and I can't really do both. But then I thought about it. Okay, if you don't mind about quality, if you just want to capture something more like a reality show, maybe I could do something. And so I kind of work out just stuck a GoPro, and then every now and then I would just switch from my camera's photo mode into video mode and do some other angles with my proper camera. And at the end of the day, I just kind of stitch them together into a more like a reality piece.
So did you end up sending a sort of bit of combination of sort of photo and video, or was it? Is it either or? Do you say, no, I'm shooting video, I'm not going to shoot any photos now, because I do slightly different to you. But
Yeah, no, no. That was really like a one-off thing, and it was really the first time people actually asked me to do that sort of thing. And but I eventually what I did was I captured all the footage of the actual proposal, and then what happened? I after the actual proposal, when everything calmed down, and then I actually asked them to mock up certain angle, and when they do things like do the kneel down again, just slightly slower, and I would just do some detail shot and just basically edit them in together, make it look more like a proper a video in a way, and but it actually worked well, very well. At the end, they really liked the video.
And so, as it is now, when you're on a shoot, because we chatted about this in the week. So do you try and do videos and stills on the same shoot, or do you explain to your clients that you can't?
Yeah.
I mean, weddings are different because obviously it's a set event and you can't stop and pause. But if you were doing something more, we'll have a look at some of an example of your corporate work, I guess, or commercial work.
Yeah.
But would you offer a client, say, I'll spend the morning doing photos and then the afternoon doing video, or do you say, no, today's a video shoot, and then if you want to do photos, I'm going to come back another time?
Well, like when you're in that sort of wedding industry, you kind of have to manage the customer's expectation and also have to educate them at the same time. The more important thing is you have to let them know that if you want to have high quality photograph, I have to be focused just purely on photography. But if you want like really high quality video, I would just purely doing video. Doing both, you splitting attention is never going to be a good thing, and you kind of get a halfway both either way. So you're not going to get really good photography nor the video. So I just have to educate them, and most of the time they would just have to say, okay, I want video, then I'll just do video, and I want photo, then I'll just purely do photo. It's rare, very rare that I would do both on a day.
Fair enough. All right, so should we have a look at one of your videos? We're getting a sip of water while we watch that. So do you want to introduce it and explain the background, or should we watch it and see if it...
Yeah, just a quick intro. This is a recent video that I did last year. Is a leather artisan based in Nottingham. He's actually a very good guy, very decent guy. He did everything in his garage, and then it's really cool that he is also like a hobbyist, but he's now starting his new business as a leather maker. So yes, watch the video if you like their work. Of course you can get in contact, and we'll just give you some link. And he actually does bespoke leather goods, so not just like a general make shoes or make bags. He actually does make to order. So if you want a specific size of a bag for your camera and things like that, he can make one for you.
Excellent. So have a look at the film.
I'm Daniel Bailey. I've been making leather goods for over 15 years. My passion for leather products started when I was a lad, when I inherited a wallet from my grandfather. Over the years, I've spent many thousands of hours in the workshop perfecting my skills. And I'm very fortunate my supplier, Euro Leathers, is just down the road. So I can drop in, discuss the product I'm going to produce, and personally select the leather. Once I have the leather, I then carefully cut out the components, I glue these together, and then comes the stitching. I like to use a traditional saddle stitch because this not only produces a very durable stitch, but an extremely attractive one. I then finish the edges by sanding and applying polish, which is then buffed to a high shine. The last stage is the overall finishing of the product. I use a natural polish, which I apply to the product, allow to dry, and then buff to a high sheen. I'm about producing high quality handmade products using the best materials, traditional techniques to produce a product my customers will appreciate and cherish, and something which ultimately I'm proud to put my name to.
There we go. Excellent. Lovely film.
Cool.
And I assume, what was that shot on? Do you remember what you shot it with? Because people are going to ask.
Yep.
100%.
It's Olympus camera. So I use two cameras on the day, the EM1X and the EM1 Mark II.
Excellent. Okay, so before we move on to the nitty-gritty of the video, well, we have got a couple of questions here that have popped up on the thing. So the first one is from CJ, and CJ says, I have an Olympus EM1 Mark II, and I want to use it for live broadcast on the webinar meeting software like Zoom. So I guess kind of what we're doing now. Obviously, I would connect to PC via Thunderbolt and use the smartphone app to control, but is that all I need? What about power saving and shutdown and camera stuff like that? So I guess the question is, what we all want to know at the moment, right, is everyone's going online, everyone's streaming, is you've got the EM1 Mark II. So how does CJ connect it all up to stream to Zoom and stuff like that?
Right, and first of all, yes, you will have to turn off the auto power saving mode, which is the I think it's in shoot menu, setting menus, so you can actually completely switch it off. Otherwise, it will turn it off automatically after whatever minute that you set. So you have to turn it off so the camera will continue to run as long as the battery can power the camera. Secondly, you can't really use your smartphone to control the camera because you're not really using it to film nor taking photograph. You're actually using the sensor and transmitting the signal to the computer to working as a webcam, so to speak. So you can't really use it. So what you have to do is to put it on a tripod or put it wherever you want to be the camera, and you have to preset everything that you want to do and just let it run like this. And in terms of connection, you will have to utilize the HDMI out from the camera, which is a micro HDMI port, and then you just have to connect through using a capture card and then to your Thunderbolt on your computer.
Marvellous. Excellent. So well, that is a very comprehensive answer. So thank you, Jimmy, for that. We have, actually, here's one. Before we do that, we've got quite a few people who said hello. So let's just say we've got hello. We've got Wales. We've got Sevenoaks, Helsinki, High Wycombe. They're not all the H's. Hampshire, Lewes, York,
awesome.
Highlands of Scotland, Stanmore. Good old Stanmore. There you go. West Sussex, Scunthorpe, Bangalore. So we've got a very international audience. No one from your hometown, though. They've all disowned you.
Where are you guys?
They've all disowned you for sticking to their stereotypes when you're out about. So we have another question here from Venkat. Who is in fact from Bangalore. So he says, in the movie, which we just saw, what were the lenses used and what's your preferred lens for shooting movies?
I tend to use all the pro lenses simply because light is always an issue when you shoot the location. Having the flexibility from a faster lens, that means you can always open up when it gets dim or just stop down when it gets bright. Of course, you have to use ND filters and things like that to cut down the light, but in terms of shooting a lower light, having a bigger aperture always gives you that extra edge when it comes to low light shooting. So in that particular video, I used the 25 and 17 1.2 because it's quite a confined space. I also use the 12mm f2 prime as well. But all of them has relatively big aperture, so that will allow me to use a slightly lower ISO and give you a cleaner image.
Excellent. And we have another hello from Malaysia. So we've really gone
Malaysia.
far away. Malaysia, and then we're back to Preston. We've got another question, but I think what we should do now, should we actually start to get down and look at some of these cameras and do some of the, we're here, to actually look at maybe some basic setups and the sort of caveats about shooting on sort of mirrorless systems, because it's not like shooting on a camcorder, is it? We've discussed this in our chats before, and I think the mistake people make is they get the camera.
I had one of those camcorders, and unfortunately I misplaced it. I mean, I would have actually get one out here to show you guys what a camcorder looks like. I bet a lot of younger generation don't even know what camcorder is these days, and I'm sure that I'm old enough to actually tell you what camcorder is. Basically, they are a video camera and dedicated only for video. I mean, I think towards the end of the camcorder era, so to speak, there were some capability allowing you to capture certain resolution of digital stills, but it's very, very poor quality, and you can just forget about it. But anyway, it's a dedicated video machines, and but what the difference between the camcorders and the mirrorless is that you have to, the best of both worlds, because most of you guys would like to take photos and videos and at the same time, like when you go and travel or we have kids playing around, sometimes it's quite good to capture the movement from your kids playing or whatever they're doing. So you do have the flexibility with the latest crop of digital cameras these days. I think anything you get in 2019, 2020 are more than sufficient to produce really great results these days. Also, like, in terms of the difference between camcorders is the autofocus, of course. Yeah, the camcorders is almost like shooting a home video. You see one of these you've been framed video on TV, and it will be that type of quality that you're getting. You never get any sort of cinematic results from a consumer level camcorders, but with digital camera now, because they're interchangeable lenses, so that means you can change into different focal lengths and different aperture, and you can achieve almost like a cinema movie kind of style if you really want to. So you can actually do a lot with modern day digital cameras.
So what's that one you're waving around there? Let's have a quick look. Show it to the...
This is a Pen F, and this is an older camera now. This is not really a great movie camera. It does a 1080, which is actually good. And but if you're really good at what you're doing and you can still use manual focus, the only thing that I'm telling you this is that a lot of you guys may, if you're starting out trying to get into videography, you may not be very hands-on, also experienced in manual focusing. So this does require you to use manual focus. The autofocus is not as good as some of the modern ones that I want to show you right now. Something like the 2019 Olympus EM5 Mark III. It has fantastic
fully rigged
autofocus now.
You've got a whole thing on that one. And that's one important thing, though, isn't it? That people, I think, expect. I mean, autofocus has improved massively over the years, right? And I think that was one thing that people enjoyed with camcorders. It was a bit much like your smartphone. You'd put it up to the... and it would be in focus pretty much, right? And there's no depth of field, really. It's just everything's in focus. But now you have to consider... It's
point and shoot, isn't it? It's point and shoot.
Right. And these are a little bit more considered, a bit more almost like actual proper movie cameras in the way that you have to set it up, focus, think about the shot a little bit more than just kind of grab it and throw it up in front of someone.
Of course, yes, absolutely. But at the same time, is there some of the later one now, like these ones, it's fairly much auto, but you can still achieve the tracking, like you mentioned, because the AF has improved so much in the last 2 or 3 years. And nowadays you can just grab hold of this. It still uses like a point and shoot because it sees the face, it tracks the face automatically.
Excellent. Okay, so just to also talk us through what you've got stuck on top there. I assume is an audio recorder you've got popped up on there.
It is, and this particular one is the LSP4 Olympus recorder, which is actually very good for vlogging purposes, because it's actually a recorder that records high-res audio, which means that, and apart from being a mic, to record your voice, you can actually use it for recording ambient noises. So it's quite good if you are like a starting out movie maker. You want to just go around recording ambient sound and put it in post-production later on and use it as a background noise and kind of thing. This is a very versatile device. You can do everything with just like a little gum size thing. There's 2 models of these. There's this LSP4 and this little silver one here, which is LSP1. I think this is the one that in the competition, isn't it?
Right,
this one
which
here.
is, yeah. So actually, while we're on that is... Do you want to give that go right up for its beautiful close-up? So that is what we're going to be giving away in conjunction with Professional Photo Magazine. So I'm going to pop a link up in the Crowdcast chat towards the end, and if you click on that link, that will take you through to the competition page, and you've got a great chance of winning, and it's a lovely prize. It's something that you should. I mean, while we're talking about audio, we'll nip back to lenses and stuff in a second, but you know. On your list of importance, how much of a priority is audio when you're shooting video?
Very high, and I actually personally think you can almost have a crap footage, but if you can't have a crap sound, it's just really, really horrible to have a really poor sound recording. I think actually sound is, people might overlook it. You need really, really high quality sound to accompany the great footage that you capture.
And it adds to the texture of the story. I mean, obviously, sometimes you might be shooting something which doesn't have any narrative in terms of speaking, but at the same time, it's something you need to consider if you're going to lay a music track on, the type of music track, the beat and the pace, because often that will be dictated by the pace of the music. I mean, when you're editing let's say a music only piece and there's no voice, do you choose the music first, or do you see how your shots come together and then try and kind of find some library music to whatever to match or what dictates the pace? Do you set that before you start shooting, or once?
Well, I used to do like a little plan first. Before I approach a client, I mean, I'll do a lot of desktop research and see what he or she does, and then I would kind of go for a mood board with them, and from the mood board I kind of develop sort of thinking behind in my head. I'm trying to describe to the client what sort of thing I'm thinking of, and so I kind of have already the pace that I wanted to go for before I film anything. And obviously after I film all the footage, I would choose the music afterwards. So I don't actually choose the music first, but I really have something in mind, what sort of pace I wanted or what sort of mood I want to go for, and I just have to find the appropriate music afterward.
Yeah, of course. And so in your kit bag, you've got your audio recorder, which is pretty versatile because obviously you're recording into the camera and you're also going to record onto there as well. So you've got... it's usually the case, isn't it, that a separate recorder is going to give you a better quality recording than going straight into the camera, but it's giving you a high quality backup, or depending on which way you look at it, I use my camera audio as the backup and my recorder audio as the main. I guess it's how competent you are, because then you have to sync it up afterwards. But what else do you kind of think is a critical piece of, if looking at audio, obviously you've got different microphones, and there isn't, it's like lenses, right? Not one lens fits all, and there isn't one microphone to suit every occasion, of course. So what would you? I mean, should we flick to? I've got. If this works, let's see if this works. We've got a little overhead camera here, which is a bit like one of those cookery demos. So let's see. So there we go. I'm not sure if that's working or not. I think it is. Marvelous. So here, there we go. Look. So what we've got here is it's actually a wireless system. So you could in fact plug this into your Olympus recorder, couldn't you? And then it becomes a wireless mic. So this is a very reasonably priced wireless mic system, and it's labelled, that would go into your camera with this little cable here, and then the other part is the transmitter. There it is, and it's very small. It's all USB chargeable, and then you get a little microphone too. So there's a little lapel mic, and then that all would work. That would work in conjunction with the little audio recorder, or you could plug it straight into the. Do all the Olympus cameras that you shoot video on have a microphone input?
Yes, most of them has, apart from the the really older model or the lower end models. But most of them will have a mic jack these days, and you can just plug it straight into the camera. If not, like you said, you can just sync it in post afterward. And especially these days, most of the editing software do allow you to auto sync, and as long as you have audio in your original file, like using the built-in mic, it will try to find the actual appropriate syncing notes, and then we're trying to sync it from there automatically.
But you can do a clap, or
you can do clap,
or listen for, or that's what clapper boards, of course, were for. So that would be a clap and a visual. But with are you wearing a tie-clip mic now? Is that what we're doing in this, or are you doing a different mic for the interview today?
I have a lapel mic here. Yes, I'm actually connecting to it. Yes.
There we go. So that's the kind of, and with a lapel mic, just in terms of the pickup, it's quite a broad space, isn't it? So we can hear your kids, probably be hungry kids in the background, but it's more of a kind of, I guess, like an oval shape that comes out from around the top of the microphone. So you're picking up a lot more of the ambient noise. And then if you wanted to be more of a sort of directional, so a common, I guess, and I assume you have one in your bag, because we spoke about it before when I put this on. So you
have a couple of here.
There you go. We got one of those. You've got some, and I've got one here. And this is a shotgun mic, or known as a boom. And we've seen them a lot on the news recently, of course, because they're the ones that go out on the stick.
The social distancing.
The social distancing microphone. And this one is a very good, high quality, reasonably priced thing, but the pickup pattern on that is very much more. Here it is. It's almost a very narrow funnel that comes out from the front. So wherever you point it, and maybe we'll do another show on audio, but wherever you point it here, and it won't pick up anything. Well, it will, but not so much from the back. So if you're kind of doing an interview, you would have it just out of shot here. And
it has one of these polar patterns, and just like this, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a very sort of a very sort of thin, long balloon, I guess, one of those modelling balloons type pattern from the out.
Yep.
So you won't get much from the sides or back, which is very useful, especially if you're in a noisy environment and stuff like that. So, you know, most people that shoot video, clearly you've got several. But the rule with audio, do you agree, is that even with any microphone, the closer you get the mic to the source of the audio,
Yes.
the better it is, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of the microphone you have.
I think this is exactly the point about what we just talked about, using different microphone for different scenario and different circumstances. And distance is the key here. Like I showed you earlier with the LSP1 and LSP4 as a vlogging mic, because most of the time when you do vlogging or do a walk and talk thing to the camera, you're almost just at an arm length. So like you're not very far away, and the mic will be okay picking up this sort of distance, and you get really clear sound. But if you're walking away from the camera, and this will become very poor, because you start picking up the entire ambience and everything around myself. So you will start hearing people walking and everything. So you will have to either use a gun mic, or you have to use a remote system that you have the wireless system to pick up your voice properly.
Sure, and of course with those little audio recorders, if you don't have it connected to the camera and you're confident to sync, you could, as many of us have done, is you can hide them. So you could, in fact, put them in a flower display at a wedding, or hide them in someone's pocket, or you can use them as almost like a wireless mic, but you obviously have to synchronize the audio later. You must have hidden those things in places, right?
Yeah, this is like been with so many weddings. This little guy here, and like you said, I actually do hide them. I hide them, underneath the flower pots, and like you mentioned, underneath the desk. Anywhere I can pick up voices, and then I just put them there.
Absolutely. So let's move back to the camera systems. What would you say is that the key? The first thing, everyone has the mental checklist that we do when we go out on the shoot. But what would you say would be the first thing that you think about when you've got all your gear, you're ready to go, you set the camera, and what do you think are the most important sort of, let's say, the top three things to think about when you're shooting video on the mirrorless system like the Olympus stuff you've got there?
I think the most important things is what you want to shoot on the day. What you want to have the camera for, because that would dictate a few things. What sort of mic you want to use for, what sort of lenses you need to bring with you for that particular shoot. So you have to, before you even go out, you have to think about, okay, I'm gonna do some travel film today, or I'm gonna just do some B-rolls, for my films, and you have to kind of think about exactly what you want to do with your camera before you set out. Like different lenses have different purposes. Like if you're just shooting B-roll of people walking around, you may actually better off using a longer lens, so you can like hiding around in the corner instead of being right in front of everybody using a big lens. And then of course, if you want to shoot some travel stuff, you might want to use a wider lens. You want to see everything, and so it really determined by whatever you want to do on the day.
And once you've got the lens and the choice, in terms of settings on the camera, because people obviously, when they get into the menu, I know lots of photographers that really want to kind of get into video, but they kind of get a bit frightened by codecs and settings and 4K, HD, do I want whatever megabits a second, it's all a bit scary, I guess. Like, so
it is.
For me, I keep it simple.
I guess, to just to make it really short, like the 4K 1080, these are our resolution. Similarly, if you're doing photography, whether you want to set it into like a 60 megapixel, 20 megapixel, 30 megapixel, the higher the number, obviously, the more detail you can capture. So you decide where you want to display your work. If you want to play back on your really big, giant 4K TV, then of course you really want to maximize your camera by shooting in 4K. But if you primarily just showing your stuff, friends and family, on an iPad or through Facebook, you really don't need to have that high resolution, to be quite honest. And but the choice is yours. I mean, of course, you can shoot 4K for everything or 1080 for everything. It doesn't really stop you. But I think in terms of photography, I think you bring up a good point there. For a lot of photographers, like myself when I first started, and getting the correct exposures is almost identical to what you would do in photography. But we talk about frame rates here, and which is a lot of photographers actually completely forgot about or doesn't understand frame rates in terms of shutter speed. They would just do the normal things, the photographer. Let's say if I'm going out, I'm trying to get shallow depth of field, and I'm shooting the lens wide open, 2.8, 1.2, or whatever, and they will just dial up the shutter speed to basically get the exposures that they want. But what they don't realize that if you're shooting the video in certain frame rates, you when you go over certain limits, your video will start becoming choppy. And then I have a lot of photographer friends who are starting videos, and they come up to me and always said to me, "Oh, how come my movie is skipping?" And so like, what's skipping? Like, you just got this jittery movement when I film something. It's like your shutter speed way too high. It's like, oh, but I'm getting the right exposure. But yeah, it doesn't work like that in video.
No,
so there's a lot of things that you have to understand from that point.
Yeah, and this is why people talk about that. The rule is, isn't it? A very quick rule, without going into too much detail, is that the shutter speed should be
the doubling rule, yeah.
Double the frame rate. So if you're shooting at 50p, which is 50 progressive, whatever, then your shutter speed should be 100 or thereabouts. So if you're shooting at 25p, it should be about 50. But a lot of cameras, that's what you were saying, you can't dip in and out and adjust the exposure. You have to go the other way around. So you either adjust the ISO to try and get it to match, or you have to use ND filters to try and bring the shutter speed down so it doesn't go crazy. Yes. Otherwise, if you want that cinematic look, then you use the double rule, I guess. And then if you want to make it a bit smoother, then you can go a bit higher. But too high or too low, it's going to look weird because it will play back and you'll get that stuttery, juddy, like webcam kind of effect, won't you?
You do. So if you're really getting serious into filming, you really want to get a cinematic look. One accessory that I think you cannot get away with is ND filter, especially if you want to utilize these big, fabulous big aperture lenses that you have, and you really want to cut down the light into the sensor to get the correct shutter speed to match the frame rate that you're shooting. So ND filter, I think, is definitely essential.
I am just digging around in my camera bag for an ND filter because while you mentioned it, I'm going to put it on.
I'm actually using one at the moment, but I can't take it off. Otherwise, it'll be really bright.
So what I'll do is if I'll cut to further enough. There you go. As if by magic. So I've got one of these actually, which you, I don't know if you've played with one of these, but this is like let me get it on the camera. So this is a variable. It's an ND and a polarizer. So it basically is. Let's see if we can see it as I turn the wheel. There we go. Is it? There we go. You can see it going lighter or darker. There we go. Perfect. It's working. So you can see my phone above it. So what we can do there, rather than having several different filters, I'm sure photographers that have done landscape work have used these before. But you can dial in the ND. So it's almost like you can just turn it. So you don't have to have several separate filters. You can just screw it on and adjust it if you like to. That's what you adjust the exposure with.
So exactly, and it's slightly different to photography. Instead of, let's say, the variable ND filter is your aperture, so to speak. So you want to keep the look of shallow depth of field. Imagine the variable ND filter is your aperture. So by turning it, it's almost like adjusting the aperture itself, but without changing the depth of field. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. So let's see if I can try and capture it again, just to get the point home. It's hard because everything's in reverse here. So there's kind of a very a small amount of ND, and then if we turn it, you should see it change. There we go. It's getting darker.
Yep.
There we go. So yeah, that's absolutely right. So it's really like, I guess people describe it as sunglasses for the camera. So the stronger the lens is, the less light comes in, but that doesn't affect your shutter speed. It does affect the shutter speed, sorry, but the exposure, not the shutter speed. So you lock the shutter speed at 100th, and then you use the dial or change the ND so you can get the exposure correct. So you kind of have to think in reverse to normal photography, I guess, in a way, because
absolutely
the shutter speed it's the same way that when you're shooting running water in stills, you have a longer exposure, and if you wanted to, you would put an ND on so you could bring the same amount of light in but use a longer exposure. It's kind of the other way around.
It is a common mistake from photographer turning into videographer. So if you ever find yourself having choppy frames, most likely that you are having too fast a shutter speed, and then you just have to match the double speed, and let's say if you're shooting 50, then you use 100, like what Rick just said. Just apply an ND filter to cut down the light, or you just have to, shut the aperture down a little bit, and just to get it correct in terms of exposure, best based on this, fixing the shutter speed. Alrighty,
so and we've got a few more hellos. So Kieran says, don't forget us Mancunians, which I can understand because that's my hometown. So hello to the motherland. Right, so we have a few questions which I wish you should start going through. So Terry has asked, what's the ratio of video to stills job, Jimmy? What's so video / stills? What would you shoot more of or less of, or what's your shooting ratio?
As of 2019, I would say it's 50-50.
Okay. There you go.
Yep.
That's a quick answer.
I have to say the video side has grown dramatically since 2018, but I'm accepting a lot more job in 2019. But this year, as you know, that we're in lockdown, so it's a completely different story, and so it's really difficult to say.
All right, cool. All right, so we have a follow-up question as well from the one before. I guess from Venkat. He said a follow-up question is why not the f1.2 or f1.8? I think you were talking about the lenses you were using. Was it to shoot that leather video?
Yes.
Maybe. So he's asking why not 1.2 or 1.8. I don't know which one.
I was shooting at 1.2, 1.8. I did use ND filters to cut down the light, which is what we just discussed about. That's why when you go back to the video, you actually see the shallow depth of field going on, and it's a lot to play around with. Because this good thing, in terms of photography, it's very different to videos. You can use shallow depth of field to isolate your subject from, in a busy scene, for instance, when you do photography. But in video, you can use the depth of field to direct your viewer's eyes, from the foreground to the background, or from one person to another. So depth of field is a very useful tool in video. And
likewise, though, you should use it carefully, because not every situation needs that shallow depth of field. Because I've seen people shooting, it might not be award-winning, but it's got conferences and stuff like that with at 2.8 or at 1.4, and the guy at the podium, his nose is in focus and his eye isn't, and he moves backwards, and then so I think that you have to. There has to be a motive or a reason, with
Absolutely.
anything with video, there has to be some sort of narrative reason to shoot at that thing. We have another question here from Luke, and Luke says, what's your thought process behind AF settings with video? So, i.e. when SAF is needed versus CAF, so single autofocus versus continuous, the old chestnut. So which situation would you use both, and other situations where one is maybe more reliable, I guess, than the other?
It's a good question, actually, because there's the three things I use: a menu focus by using complete control if I'm actually on the camera. In terms of CAF, and I would use CAF if I am having the camera on the gimbal, which is something I haven't talked about yet. And because it's a little bit harder if I'm actually controlling the gimbal and trying to focus at the same time. So I will use CAF on the gimbal. And also if I am filming myself, if I'm doing something like a presentations and there is no one manning the camera for me, and I just basically plonk the camera in front of the tripod, exactly what I'm doing right now. So the camera using CAF complete, that's why you can actually see that the camera can pick up my hands and go back to my face automatically.
Yeah. So just do that demo again. I was on the two shot. So stick your hand up and you'll see the camera.
There you go.
There you go.
Right, you can see this on my hands again. Now let's go back to my face. So it's all auto, and I don't need a cameraman assistant there just to film this for me, which is actually a very useful tool. And in some single AF, and I do use it, but very rarely in video. So if I want to, let's say, do a product shot, if I'm trying to do something that I'm coming in, just do a single focus, I'm just moving away, just trying to keep the focus and just having this kind of outro shot in a way, and I'll use single focus. But it's very, very rare I'll use that.
Excellent stuff. So we have here, which leads us nicely onto the next point you touched on, and we're pushed for time a little bit, but Matt says, what would you use in terms of handheld shooting? Would you rely on the internal VR of the camera, or suggest something like the Ronin? So beautiful segue into talking about different support systems very briefly. So there we go. What have you got there? What toy is that?
This is a GN Gimbals, and is actually a very compact solution that was perfect for Micro Four Thread system, because it's really small. And if I just took it out, it's actually, you can fold it flat completely. So this is actually the size of it. I have a lot of things attached to it. I have the wireless transmitter, so it just makes it look bulky, but you don't need all that. And so to answer your question, that leather video you just saw, and I would say 90% of the shot that in there is actually handheld. You completely relying on the in-body stabilization from the camera, The only time I used the gimbal was there was a scene when I was actually putting the camera really low down, shooting the artisan's foot walking away from me, and that's the only time I used the gimbal.
Alrighty, excellent. So that answers the questions. But it's like with a lot of these tools, is that they're all great to have, right? And you can buy, and as photographers and videographers, we do tend to drool a lot over new gear and old gear and want to continue. But actually, sometimes using the camera and learning it and getting familiar with it, and the cameras that you're shooting on, they have incredible stabilization, which almost negates the need. I mean, obviously, if you're shooting something longer, you need to put it on a tripod because you're not going to stand there for half an hour. But for a lot of stuff, it's come such a long way since back in the day. But you can do a whole shoot. You could do gimbal-like moves just using the internal stabilization of the camera, right? And you don't need to rely on. You don't have to go out and spend hundreds of pounds on equipment until you're really familiar with how what you've got works. And I think with video especially, because good video equipment is expensive, as are good lenses. And I think the danger is to go out and buy a drone, buy a gimbal, buy whatever, and without really having a reason or like we were saying about the narrative before, right? To go and try and shoehorn gimbals and sliders and drones into every single shot that we do because we've got them. That I would, for me, it's always keeping it simple and learning the basics and getting the shots to be in focus, exposed correctly, is more important than the kit.
Like you just don't overbuy it. Buy what you need at the time, and like you said, Rick, they are tools. If you don't use a tool, they become a waste. So if you're buying something that you really don't use, and it's really no point for it.
Excellent. Right. Well, we have yet another question. An anonymous Space Invader icon has said, what would be the best frame rate for Facebook?
Oh, Facebook. Well, to be honest, anything, because the compression that they use on Facebook is it's so high that you can't really see any quality from anything. I just do whatever you're comfortable with, and to keep the file size down and anything like that. I mean, you might just want to stick with 25 for just easy.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even this stream that we're sending out today, anything it's 1280 by 720, so it's HD, but it's not full HD. But Facebook can't deal with it. Scales it down. It goes all crappy anyway.
Yeah.
And also, if you're streaming, you want to. I would rather go for fluidity and a crisper image and trying to, cram every pixel, because most systems, YouTube, Facebook, they don't handle well necessarily lots of big data coming off your computer. So
absolutely. And funny you mentioned that. I think streaming. If you, I think one question earlier about streaming. When we first answered the question was that if you do want to do like Zoom and things like that, don't set it to 4K, even 1080, because unless you have a very fast internet, because it's not about download speed, it's about upload speed, because you're actually sending the signal out to the server, so you need a very fast upload. So if you don't have that, there's really no point using very high setting. 720 is actually much better choice than doing a 1080 even.
Absolutely, and also it's thinking about your audio as well. So if you're gonna doing your Zoom conversations or whatever you're doing, get your camera set up fine, but stick a little audio recorder and use that mic and plug that through your computer because it makes a massive difference.
Right here.
Because there you go. Well, how about one of those? And while we're on the case, we've got one last question to ask. But I'm going to pop up this thing now. On screen, so you should see people in Crowdcast where it says "Win an Olympus LSP1 audio recorder." So you can click it now or you can click it later. I'll leave that up there for a while. But if you click that, it will take you through to a page on the lovely folks at Professional Photo Magazine are running the competition, and they have one to give away. And it's an amazing piece of kit to add to your kit bag, right? And get cracking, because thinking about your sound is so important. We do have. Let's see this last question. Where are we? Question. Right, so we have a question here. Matt again. Would you suggest an external monitor rigged to the camera? Does this also act as an external hard drive? So I think he's talking about the Atomos type of monitor versus just a regular sort of, a regular fee. So what's your thoughts on that?
Right. Okay, there are two things there you mentioned. One is using it as a monitor, and second, using as a recorder. So let's talk one thing at a time. So if you're using as a monitor, I think is a very good idea. Simply because the usually in any digital camera, the screen is actually quite small. And unless you have a very good eye and also doing manual focus, even though you may use focusing aids like focusing peaking and also the magnified, it's just a little bit more cumbersome. So having a much bigger screen on top of the camera, it will make your focusing and compositions a lot easier, and also like less straining your eyes as well, because it's still a very small screen. But in terms of recording, that's a totally different thing altogether, because you are taking the HDMI signal from the camera, so you'll be recording from the recorder using the recorder's processor. Instead of the camera itself, so you can do like all kinds of things depending on whether the camera supports or whether the actual recorder supports it. You can do like 4K 60s and all this high bit rate, high compression rate video recording, instead of just utilizing the internal recording, which sometimes is a little bit lower resolution, and not really low resolution, a bit lower quality in terms of bit rate. So yeah, you will get high quality, from an external recorder usually, and also having you can do Apple ProRes stuff, which is very huge files and things like that. So if you need it, then you do it. But don't forget, having an external recorder, those files can be significantly larger than what you would normally do in camera, all to do with the file size and bitrate. So you usually, if you use your camera and shooting it with a like 128 gig SD card or CF card, if you use external thing, you might actually want to invest in a very large 1 to 2 terabyte SSD stuck it behind it, because if you use ProRes or any higher stuff, you are going to run out of space very soon.
And also, it changes the form factor, and then you go from something which you can kind of carry over your shoulder, right, to something which has become, you're building a system. And like we've said before, when I first started shooting video on a 5D 2, I built this whole rig, and it was huge. and I was like, I couldn't even move. I was like RoboCop, and I realised that all I was doing was actually, I didn't need all the attachments. I felt I had to have them, and by the time you plug everything up to it, you're building a camera into something which actually stops its usability for other types of shots. I mean, it was great for kind of setup and documentary when you're doing interviews, but when you want to go, they called it run and gun, right? It's really hard if you've got things hanging off it, because then you need to balance it, and then you need more power. The monitor needs a battery, and that battery is heavy, and then it needs a cable, and then if you put that onto a gimbal, then it doesn't balance, and it's the whole, right? We've been there, and so you're kind of asking for a bit more. I
think that's kind of the total divided purpose of having a mirrorless camera, because the way we want to do with the mirrorless camera is being small and lightweight, so you can actually shoot anywhere, right? You start really rigging it out into a big system, and then it becoming more like a movie camera, then it's a very different thing altogether. So it's really depending on your need. If you're just like a casual filmmaker, or even like if you're doing commercial work, you don't really need to have the whole thing set up unless you really, really need it. Having a small system does allow you to, like, let's say, go to tight spaces, getting close into a very confined space. Because once you rig it out, like Rick just said, you could end up having like a shoulder support, having these lights and monitor, mic, whatever, also barn doors, for the light shades and ND filters. You end up really big system afterward.
Yeah, totally. Now we've got a question here.
Yep.
I'm not entirely sure who it's aimed at. So it's either an in-joke aimed at you, or it's an in-joke aimed at me. So if I read it out, and I'm not sure, well, I mean, everyone can see it, but it says, how do you get your beard looking like roadkill? So it's either a joke that you know about, or it's my terrible unshaven. So I don't know who it's. Sarah says that. Do you know? Is this some sort of Olympus joke, or is it me? Is someone having a go at me? I've got no idea.
I have no idea, but I haven't shaved myself for about 3 days, so that might be it.
I've gone a bit lazy. I've done the whole lockdown laziness. I was doing all right. I was kept shaving regularly, but I thought I'd go a bit more rugged. But I can't compete with yours is a little bit more stylized than mine.
I thought this is more like an artistic look. So I know I'm coming on screen today. That's why I'm kind of deliberately grow this, and hopefully I can make more like an artistic impression.
The creative beard. I just look like a hostage. Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything, unless there's any more last-minute questions that have come in. But we've kind of gone through them all. I think it's Thursday. It's just after 6, bank holiday, for what it's worth, right?
Yep, for what it's worth. Everyone's probably grabbing beers by now.
I think so, if they've all passed out. But Jimmy, thank you so much for taking time out. I know you've been doing tons
Thank
of
you
these
for
lives,
inviting me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for all your words and thanks for sharing your work with us. Take care of yourself, I guess, is what you say to people now. Look after, stay at home, be good. And everyone else, of course, out there as well. Please stay safe. Let's, I guess we're all in it together, blah, blah, blah. And the people out there, the photographers and creatives, we're all in the same boat. And this is something that we've chatted about before. We're all suffering in different ways. So I guess the thing is to hang in there, and we'll come through the other side. And thank you so much to everyone who's joined us. Remember the link at the bottom on the Crowdcast. Click through that to win one of those. Do you want to hold that lovely silver box of joy that you've got there, Jimmy? Do you want to hold up that?
Of course.
A little bit's in your pocket.
I'm going to bring it close up and then bring it into focus. There you go.
Beautiful little voice recorder, audio recorder there to carry around with you, so you can record your lockdown memoirs with super high fidelity sound. And look at that. What do you do then? That's a bit smart, isn't it?
So you can connect straight to your computer. We're using the built-in USB.
You kept that one till the end. A little treat there for us all. Little thing popping out the bottom. Excellent stuff. Listen, Jimmy, thanks so much. Take care of yourself. Go and sort your kids out. And to everyone else, click the link, enter the competition. Good luck with it. This show will be available on Crowdcast on the replay. So if you haven't seen all, you can go back and do it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm glad you all enjoyed it. Nicola, you're welcome. Neil, you're welcome. Peter, you're welcome. Matt, you're welcome. Jack, you're welcome. Everyone's welcome. And a special mention to Manchester, just because can't get the link to work or event. Okay, so I will sort the link out.
You know what? I actually lived in Manchester for 2 years.
Did you? Let's have a look. See if it's. I think the link the link should work. Let me try it myself while we're on there. Is it working? I will repost it. Keep on in the chat, and I'll check it once we cut the stream off. But stay in there, and I'll get the link to work, and I'll post it into the chat if it doesn't work. But it should do. Have tried. Okay, guys, hang in there. I'll sort the link out. It might just be me. Hang in there. Oh, keep trying the link. Terry says keep trying the link. So a copy and paste link will save it. It does work eventually. I think you're killing the servers at Professional Photo Magazine. So don't ruin Terry's weekend. Terry's the editor, so bear with us. Terry's going to have a paddy, but we will get there in the end. But Jimmy, listen, thanks so much. Keep up the good work, and we'll chat again soon. Everyone else, have a great bank holiday, and I hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much. Take care.
You should not go out stay at home. Start working from home. Stop non-essential contact. Protect our NHS. Stay at home. And save lives.